Welcome to the cost of choice. Every life is shaped by choices, some made in seconds, some carried for decades. Here, we tell the stories of the moments that changed everything. Stories of family, betrayal, greed, loyalty. Because every choice has a cost. This is a dramatized story inspired by real medical phenomena. Names, events, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy while preserving the emotional truth of the story. There is a specific sound an envelope makes when you pick it up off a granite counter at 6 a.m. before anyone else in the house is awake and your hands are shaking too hard to open it. It's not a dramatic sound, it's just paper. But I stood in my kitchen on December 23rd, holding that sound in my hands, and some part of me already knew that whatever was inside was going to follow us long after Christmas was over. I didn't open it that morning. I put it in the drawer under the coffee filters, where I told myself no one would think to look. Then I went and made breakfast for two 10-year-old boys who had no idea their whole world was sitting 6 feet away from their cereal bowls. 3 days later, that envelope would be sitting open on our dinner table, in front of my husband's entire family, and it would force one man to confront something none of us believed could be true. If you've ever had someone in your own family smile at you while quietly working to take everything you love, stay with me. Because I need you to meet the person who caused all of this before I tell you what happened at that table. If stories built around real medical mysteries and family secrets are your kind of thing, subscribe. We've got a lot more to uncover. My name is Rachel. This is the story of the Christmas my husband's own body put our marriage on trial. Let me take you back. 10 years ago, before any of this happened, my life was simple in the best way. I was married to a man named David. Steady, quiet, the kind of man who fixes things without being asked, and remembers how you take your coffee, after one time of telling him. We weren't rich, we weren't glamorous, we were just happy. Genuinely, deeply happy, in that quiet way most people don't even notice until they've lost it. When I found out I was pregnant with twins, David cried in the parking lot of the doctor's office. Not because he was scared, because he said he never thought he'd be lucky enough to have one child, let alone two at once. We named them Ethan and Noah, two boys, born 4 minutes apart, who came into this world holding on to each other in the incubator because the nurses said they wouldn't stop reaching for one another. For 10 years, I built a life around those two boys. I learned to tell them apart, not by their faces, because even I mixed them up sometimes in the beginning, but by the way Ethan hums when he's concentrating, and the way Noah always has to touch the doorframe before walking through it, like some silly little ritual. I learned their sicknesses, their fears, their favorite bedtime stories. They'd asked for so many times, I could recite them in my sleep. I gave up a promotion at my job because it meant relocating away from the school district they loved. I said no to nights out with friends, more times than I can count. Not because I was a martyr, because that's what love looks like when nobody's watching. David was right there beside me through all of it. Late night feedings, school projects, at 11 at night, birthday parties with too many balloons and not enough sleep. We weren't just parents. We were a team. There was just one person who never quite felt like part of that team. David's older brother, Gregory. I need to give you something more specific than the jealous brother, because that's not really what Gregory was. If it were that simple, I probably would have seen it coming. Gregory was David's older brother by 3 years, and for most of their 20s, the two of them were actually close. Close enough that when Gregory started a small contracting business, David put in $8,000 of his own savings to help him get the equipment off the ground. It wasn't a loan on paper. It was a favor between brothers, the kind you don't write down. Because you assume family doesn't need a contract, the business failed within 2 years. Gregory blamed a bad market. Privately, David always suspected it was Gregory's temper with clients. He'd fire people who complained, walk off jobs he thought were beneath him. Either way, the money was gone. And so, slowly, was whatever ease used to exist between the two brothers. What made it worse, and this part I only pieced together after everything happened, is that Gregory had feelings for me before David and I ever got together. Nothing was ever said outright. It showed up in smaller ways. He was the only person who didn't say a word at our wedding toast when it was his turn, just raised his glass and sat down. It showed up in how he'd bring up David's failed investment in front of other people, always phrased as a joke, always timed to land, right after someone complimented our marriage. For 10 years, I told myself this was just how brothers were with each other, a little competitive, a little bruised. I had no idea Gregory had spent a decade keeping score, and that he was about to find the one card that could let him settle it all at once. That card arrived, the Christmas our twins turned 10. It started small enough that I almost didn't register it as a strategy. That's what made Gregory dangerous. His cruelty never announced itself. At a 4th of July gathering that summer, with the whole family gathered around a picnic table, in my mother-in-law's backyard, Gregory watched our son Noah. For a solid 10 seconds, long enough that I noticed, before saying, casually, to no one in particular, "It's funny, Ethan's got your jaw, David, all the way down to the chin. Noah's got something else going on." He said it while spooning potato salad onto his plate. Didn't even look up. That's what made it land. He wasn't accusing anyone. He was just noticing something out loud, the way you'd mention the weather. David laughed it off, but I watched something shift behind his eyes, a small crack that hadn't existed 30 seconds earlier. Over the months that followed, Gregory found new ways to widen that crack without ever raising his voice. He brought up, out of nowhere, that their grandfather had a heart condition that really the boys should get tested for, using medical concern as the perfect Trojan horse for a much more specific kind of doubt. He mentioned, at David's birthday, that he'd read something about paternity testing being more affordable now than people think. Always practical, always reasonable sounding, never once did it sound like an accusation, which is exactly why it worked. I think a lot of you watching this have met a Gregory of your own, someone who never says the ugly thing directly, just leaves it where you'll trip over it yourself. If that's familiar, tell me in the comments how you finally recognized what was happening, because I promise you, naming it out loud is the first thing that breaks its power. By the time Christmas came around, David had quietly ordered one of those at-home DNA testing kits. We mailed the samples a few weeks later, and all that was left was to wait for the results. Not, he told me, because he doubted me, but because 6 months of Gregory's careful little comments had lodged something in him. He couldn't shake loose on his own. When he told me, I remember the specific physical sensation of my chest caving inward, not from guilt, but from the realization that a decade of loyalty could be undone, this quietly, this politely, by someone smiling the whole time. The test results were set to arrive right before Christmas. David, in a moment I still don't fully understand, decided we would open them at the dinner table, in front of everyone, in front of his mother, his brother, our sons. I begged him not to. I told him this was not something to turn into a family spectacle. But Gregory, sweet, concerned, Gregory, insisted it would be better to clear the air once and for all as a family. He said it with a small, satisfied smile that I didn't understand until much later. So there we were, Christmas dinner. The table set beautifully, the one my mother-in-law had spent all day preparing. The kids laughing about something, at the end of the table, blissfully unaware of the storm about to hit them, and in the middle of the table, next to the mashed potatoes and the cranberry sauce, sat a plain white envelope that was about to tear my family apart. David opened it with shaking hands. I remember gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. I remember praying, actually praying, that whatever was inside would just confirm what I already knew. That these were our boys, made from our love, nothing more complicated than that. He read it. He didn't say anything at first. His face went pale. Then he looked up and said the words that changed everything. Ethan matches me completely. But Noah doesn't. Gregory didn't wait a full breath before he spoke. Well, he said, setting down his fork with theatrical care, I guess that answers something I've wondered about for a while. Not shouting, not even looking at me directly, just loud enough that everyone at the table heard exactly what he wanted them to hear. For a moment, the table went silent. My mother-in-law's fork clattered against her plate, and I watched, in horror, as every eye at that table turned toward me. If you're feeling that knot in your stomach right now, that's exactly what I felt. Imagine 10 years of loyalty being erased in a single sentence, in front of the people you love, at Christmas, with your own children, close enough to hear every word. David left the table, didn't say a word to me, just walked out into the cold, leaving me sitting there with two confused, frightened little boys and a room full of relatives who suddenly weren't sure what to believe. That night was, without question, the darkest night of my entire life. I sat awake until 4 in the morning, replaying every single day of the last 10 years, wondering how a man I built my whole world with could look at me like I was a stranger because of one piece of paper and his brother's poison. If you've ever been falsely accused by someone who should have known you better, drop a comment below and tell me how you got through it, because what I'm about to tell you is the reason I'm still standing here today, and I think it might give you hope too. David didn't come home for 2 days. When he finally did, it wasn't to apologize. It was because his doctor had called him with something that changed everything we thought we knew. See, in his spiral of doubt after Christmas, David had gone to get more comprehensive testing done. Not just the standard consumer DNA kit, but a full clinical panel at his doctor's recommendation to understand exactly what could cause a result like this. What the doctors found surprised even them. David was told he is what's known in medicine as a chimera, specifically tetragametic chimerism. It's rare, genuinely rare. It happens when a woman is pregnant with twins very early on, and one of those twin embryos doesn't survive. It's absorbed into the other twin in the womb. The surviving twin then carries 2 separate sets of DNA in different parts of their body, one from themselves and one from the sibling they absorbed before birth. David had always been told as a child that his mother had been pregnant with twins, but that one twin had been lost very early in the pregnancy. Nobody ever thought about it again. Nobody ever imagined it would matter 3 decades later, but it did. David had unknowingly absorbed his own twin in the womb. Different cells throughout his body carried 2 different genetic profiles. When our son Noah inherited traits from the second genetic profile, inside David's body, it created a DNA mismatch that looked, on paper, exactly like infidelity, but was actually one of the rarest biological phenomena in human genetics. Noah was David's son. He always had been. Science had simply never caught up to explain how until now. I want you to imagine the weight lifting off my chest in that moment. 10 years of loyalty, 10 years of sacrifice, 10 years of love, vindicated completely by biology neither of us even knew existed inside my own husband's body. If this story has stayed with you this far, I'd really appreciate you hitting the like button. It helps this story reach more people and lets me know you'd like to hear more stories like this. But the story wasn't over yet. This part still gets to me more than the DNA results ever did. Once the chimerism explanation came out, David sat down and actually reconstructed, out loud, every single comment Gregory had made over the previous year. The jaw comment at the 4th of July. The convenient grandfather's heart condition, the throwaway line about affordable paternity testing at his own birthday, laid end to end like that. It wasn't a series of coincidences, it was a campaign. When David confronted him directly, Gregory didn't deny planting the doubt. What he denied, at first, was that it had anything to do with the $8,000 he never repaid, or with a decade of watching David's marriage succeed, where his own business, and by then, his second marriage, had both quietly fallen apart. But the truth came out anyway, the way it usually does, When someone's been rehearsing a grievance in private for 10 years, he admitted, low and clipped, that some part of him had wanted, just once, to be the one who was right about something in this family. That's not a monologue villain moment. That's just what quiet resentment sounds like. When it finally runs out of room to hide, Gregory wasn't disgraced in some dramatic blow-up. It was quieter than that, and honestly, more damning. His mother stopped inviting him to the same holidays as us. Conversations at family events got shorter. People simply stopped giving Gregory the benefit of the doubt. The trust he'd spent years destroying was finally gone. I won't pretend I don't feel something complicated about that. Jealousy like his doesn't come from nowhere, but understanding where cruelty comes from was never the same thing as excusing what it costs the people on the other end of it. David and I are still together, stronger, honestly, than we've ever been, because nothing tests a marriage like being forced to fight for it in front of everyone you know. Ethan and Noah are 10 years old now, and someday, when they're older, we'll explain to them exactly what happened that Christmas and how science proved something that love already knew all along. Before I go, I want to ask you something specific to this story. Gregory never repaid that $8,000, and he spent a decade watching David's life work out while his own didn't. If you were David, would you have forgiven a brother who used your children to even that score? Or is some debt just not the kind you let back into your holidays? Tell me what you'd actually do. Not what sounds good in a comment section. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if stories like this are why you're here, I'd be grateful if you subscribed. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next story.